With me today is T.W. Shannon. He served in Oklahoma's House of Representatives as Oklahoma's youngest and first African-American Speaker of the House. And we're talking about Oklahoma. And now he's running for Senator Tom Coburn's Senate seat in a special election. Welcome, T.W. Shannon.
Thank you, Mallory. Honored to be here.
Okay, let's get right down to it. What's going on in your race? You're running against a U.S. representative that has a lot of money.
You bet. Well, you know, when Dr. Coburn stepped down, he left us about 4 months to run an 18-month race. But I will tell you, we've been galvanized. We're the first ones on the air. People are responding to our message. People are concerned about the direction of our country. That's the reason I got in the race, because I am too. People are concerned about the outrageous spending and the out-of-control debt that we see from this Congress. And I believe it's going to take a new generation of leadership to go to Washington and say no to the liberal agenda, Barack Obama, and the rest of his merry men and women.
What's the differences between you and your main rival, James Langford?
Well, you know, we certainly both have a voting record, Mallory, and I think that I'll let him speak for his. But, you know, I think when you look at my record, when I was Speaker of the House, you know, we were able to reduce the debt load of the state of Oklahoma by almost $100 million by not incurring new debt. We had that much to follow. We pushed back against Medicaid expansion. We said no to Common Core. We moved to nullify Obamacare. We have a conservative record that we think if you take the principles of conservatism that they lead to prosperity, we need to take them to Washington, D.C.
You said no to Common Core.
We did.
Why? I happen to agree with you, by the way, but why?
You bet. Well, you know, when Common Core
curriculum we're talking about.
Absolutely. And when it was first introduced, you know, many of us didn't know what it was. We didn't know the background. But as more and more has come out, what we know is this just opens the door to more federal intrusion. We've seen what the federal government has done to health care. Why in the world would we want the federal government controlling what our children are being taught?
So for our viewers, Common Core curriculum is a curriculum that's going to be overlaid throughout the United States.
Yeah, you've got the curriculum, you've got the standard, and you've got the testing. And what it does, it moves us into having this monolithic view of education. You know, the states, we've got 50 states for a reason. We are the United States of America, not the United States. And there's no reason that our 50 states shouldn't be competing. If we want to know how our children are faring compared to each other nationally, we can use the ACT. There's no reason for a nationalized standard. That's why we're pushing against it in Oklahoma.
Okay, Langford, your major rival, he can use his funds from his House campaigns. You can't use your state funds for your Senate campaign. Doesn't that put you at a big disadvantage?
Well, I wouldn't call it a disadvantage. Obviously, we start out behind. We're definitely the underdog in this race.
But he started out with over $500,000.
You bet. Every election.
That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money. Every election I've ever been in, I've been the underdog. Whether it was running for the State House of Representatives, the first Republican elected to my district, or being the most conservative speaker, youngest speaker elected to the Oklahoma House of Representatives, I've always been the underdog. That's the place I'm most comfortable. But I would tell you this, we've closed the gap very quickly. People have been responding to our message of less government, limited government, reminding the United States Congress, most of all the United States Senate, that Congress has enumerated powers and they shouldn't get outside of that. And I will tell you, we're closing the gap quickly.
Okay, let's talk about the big issues. What is the biggest threat to America's economic prosperity?
Oh, there's no question. It's the national debt. The way that we keep incurring $17 trillion is the national debt, and that doesn't include the entitlement programs. And right now, Washington, D.C., or the politicians that have been there, they've come up with no plan to fix it. We need to fix it, balancing our budget. We do it in Oklahoma. We do it in our own personal lives.
Yes, but Representative Shannon, everybody says that.
Yeah.
How are you going to get it under control? What are you going to do?
Well, you know, I like the penny plan. I mean, many people have talked about it, but any plan that makes Washington, D.C. Yeah, any plan that makes Washington, D.C. Well, it's just about reducing by 1% every year the amount that the federal government spends. I think everybody understands what 1% means. It's not that difficult. It's not that hard. But we do it in Oklahoma, right? There's always, what I found out when I became Speaker, Mallory, there's always something in the system making it grow. If there's not somebody in the room saying, no, we're not going to grow government, we're not going to continue to spend, and we're not going to add more debt, it will just grow. I think I'm that guy to do it. We did it in Oklahoma. We can do it in Washington, D.C.
Let's talk about names. Let's talk names now. Who are some of the people you respect most in Congress?
Oh, there's no question Dr. Coburn's been, you know, a hero, I think, for many in the conservative movement. There are others. Congressman J.C. Watts, who I work for, I think has been a great friend and mentor. And anybody who is committed to conservative principles. And like J.C. always said, being conservative just means doing what your grandmother taught you to do.
You want to name a few other names?
I think those are great. I love what Ted Cruz has done to make sure that we fight against, government growth and spending. I love what Mike Lee's done. I think those have been great champions for the conservative movement. But I like a lot of governors. I love what Governor Palin did while she was in Alaska, and what she's continued to do to keep the conservative movement at the forefront of people's minds. Because again, as we creep towards socialism, it's so easy for people, especially young people, to do it. And I appreciate leaders like Rand Paul, who have even encouraged young people to get involved in the fight.
Okay, right now, foreign relations are the states that border you. You're going to be involved if you make it to the Senate, and I hope you do. Yeah. You're going to be involved in some national and international issues. What do you think our greatest national security threats are? Well,
I don't know if it's the greatest, but certainly one of them is our border security. People talk a lot about immigration reform. I believe that's a national security issue. We need to secure our borders. We don't know who's coming in and out of this country right now. That's a national security risk. Certainly, a nuclear Iran is problematic, I think. We need to do all that we can to support our greatest ally, Israel. Certainly what's happening with the growth of Red China, our debt issue, I think that's a national security issue, frankly, that we can't even balance our budget, that China is our greatest creditor. I think those are national security issues, and we need to make sure, what we do know is this: when America's strong, the world is a safer place, and until we get our fiscal house in order, we're at risk.
You keep advocating for a smaller federal government. A lot of other people do, but somehow it never gets smaller. Would you get rid of any agencies?
Absolutely. Get rid of the EPA. I think that's the first thing we can do. The EPA has continued to add more government burden, more government red tape. It's been the enforcement arm of Barack Obama. We should get rid of it today. But I will tell you the other thing we've got to do, and I hope to take this same mindset when I'm in Washington, D.C. We need to empower the states to use their constitutional rights. The 10th Amendment is in the Constitution for a reason. And one thing's for sure, we can't continue to wait for the federal government to lead. Whether you're talking about health care or education, Washington's proven it's either incapable or unwilling. We need a new generation of leadership that will empower the states to enact their constitutional God-given rights.
Any other agencies would you get rid of?
I'd certainly look at, getting rid of the Department of Education. We've spent $2 billion in the Department of Education, and we've seen no improvements whatsoever in the areas of education. Washington, D.C. shouldn't be dictating what our young people are learning in schools. In fact, we need to get the federal government out and remind them to get back to their constitutionally enumerated powers.
You've talked about President Obama causing our debt to skyrocket, but Republicans have done that too.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's accountable. If you're in Washington, D.C., and you haven't put forward a plan to balance the budget, I think you are responsible, and they should be held accountable. And I think this next election cycle, we're going to see it, because when I travel the great state of Oklahoma, what I hear most of all is, Representative Shannon, Mr. Speaker, what are you going to do when you get to Washington, D.C. to fix the debt? I'm sick of Washington, D.C. spending more than it makes. When we have tough times at home, we have to balance our budget. There's no reason that Washington can't too.
Representative Shannon, you talk about issues like, and I agree with you that EPA needs to be getting rid of to save money, and Department of Education, big dollars, but you and I both know the real money's in entitlements.
That's exactly right.
How are you going to reform entitlements?
Well, listen, the bottom line is this, Mallory. The safety nets that were created in this country, they need to be completely examined and restructured so that they're affordable. The problem we have now, the engine that funds the safety nets, it can't keep up. The net is now larger than the engine, and that's a problem. And so we've got to get our fiscal house in order. And the way that you do that is by not spending more than you make. Stop adding more debt. You're never going to get rid of debt if you keep adding to it.
I'm going to press you on this a little bit. How do you reform entitlements?
Well, I think it's real easy. I think, number one, when you look at things like Medicare, push more of it back down to the states. Allow the states to be empowered to make the decisions that that court their own course of action, that chart their own course of action. As far as the entitlement programs, I don't know there's any reason. People are living longer. People are living healthier.
Medicaid.
There's no reason that we can't. Well, I think first of all, we've got too much. We need to raise. Also, look at who we're allowed to be added to the Medicaid rolls. In Oklahoma, we said no to Medicaid expansion. 1 in 3 people in the state of Oklahoma, Mallory, are on Medicaid right now. Think about that. 1 in 3 people, 1 in 4 people. If we had expanded it, it would be 1 in 3 people right now. We said no, we should do the same thing at the federal level.
To govern, you have to get elected.
You bet.
The Republican Party has done a fairly poor job of bringing minorities in to the bigger tent. Think you can do that?
I think we can. I think what we've got to be focused on is the fact that we don't have to run from our conservative principles and beliefs. This idea that we somehow have to change who we are or what we believe to reach minorities is just not true. What we need is the same message, but we need the new messengers. And the challenge we've had in the Republican Party, we haven't always showed up at cultural events. The first key to winning elections is showing up. You got to be where people are. We need to be in the minority communities, not changing our message, not changing our message and our positions on immigration, not changing what we believe on entitlement and welfare programs, but explaining how conservative principles are what lead to prosperity. That's what we believe, and we should be espousing, and we don't have to be ashamed of it.
If you're the nominee, do you think you'll get a substantial percentage of minorities voting for you?
Well, I certainly did in my first election when I ran for the House of Representatives. I actually carried the minority vote and the African-American vote, even though I was the first Republican elected in my district. So we want everybody.
Wow.
Anybody who believes what we believe, we want them voting for us, regardless of the color of their skin.
How'd you sum up your beliefs simply?
I'm a conservative who believes in less government and lower taxes. I'm strongly pro-life, and I believe that marriage should be between one man and one woman, and I'm a strong proponent of the 10th Amendment and the Second Amendment. That's who I am. I learned those values not from some politician. I didn't learn them in Washington, D.C. I learned them in the pews of my church, Bethlehem Baptist Church in Lawton, Oklahoma.
T.W. Shannon, if President Obama called you up today and said, give me one piece of advice, what would that one piece of advice be?
Resign. No, in all seriously, I would tell him, the president needs to learn that this is not we're not an imperialistic presidency. He needs to learn that he has to work with Republicans in Congress. He needs to find a way to come to the middle ground and listen to the people that have put the Congress in there to be the elected officials. If he would listen to the people, I think we would have a very different agenda, a very different country. But it requires people listening to those folks back home that put them in office. That's what's missing in Washington, D.C., Mallory.
Representative T.W. Shannon, I want a commitment for you that after you become Senator Shannon, that you're going to be back here during your first 90 days.
If you will help me get there, you've got that commitment, Mallory.
I have you coming tonight.
Excellent.
So I got that commitment?
Fantastic. You've got the commitment. I'll be there.
T.W. Shannon, representative from Oklahoma, running for the open seat left by resigning Tom Coburn. Look forward to seeing you within 90 days after the election.
I can't wait. Looking forward to it.